All right, well, I want to give a huge thank you to Jesse Cannon for coming here and taking the time to speak with us today. You just came out with a new book very recently, which is for musicians and anyone trying to make a name for themselves in the music industry. Can you tell us about the new book, Get More Fans, the DIY Guide to the New Music Industry, and why should we read it?
So the book is basically, over the years, I felt like I've always seen bands do things that are really inappropriate, like, back in the day it was spamming MySpace walls with comments, and now it's, this bothering people on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. And what I've always seen is that bands don't have the information about how to actually build a fan base that doesn't annoy the crap out of people as their first impression with you. And so I wrote a book because I really feel like the more bands know how to actually get their music out, the better a music scene we'll have, no matter what type of music you like. And I really wanted, as I get more old and jaded, it's harder for me to find good music, and I really want the bands I love to get their music out there. So I wrote a 700-page book that was all about my experience as a record label worker, radio station employee, record store employee, record producer, and I managed two bands called Man Overboard and Transit, where I got a lot of experience seeing how you build a fan base, and I basically wanted to share that knowledge with everybody, and that's why we wrote a book. My co-author, Todd Thomas, is in a band called Sensual Harassment, who's been covered by Vice and Pitchfork and are really beloved in the dance scene. So we took all this knowledge of different genres that we work in and we love and put it all together in one book.
Fantastic. And it is a huge book. When I downloaded a copy of it, it is enormous. The amount of tips that are in this book is just wow. Are there any experiences that you thought were most valuable to writing this book?
Well, first off, thank you for those kind words. And I guess one of the biggest things is well, every group has a different thing. I talk to so many different musicians a day coming through my studio or just emailing or commenting on our blog. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that bands have is they get so scared because they read things there's that big New Yorker article about how the band Grizzly Bear is broke even though they sell 100,000 records. And the fact is that there's a lot of doom and gloom in this music business today, but it comes from people who aren't doing it right and don't see how it's done. It's the people who are doing bad practices. And what I wanted to do with this book is show you, we have a humongous chapter on merchandise. For a lot of bands, especially indie rock bands or dance bands, they don't really get how merchandise is going to work for them. But there's tons of creative ways that people aren't fully going down the avenues with. And then if you're more of a punk band, you see your idols all selling their records instead of giving them away for free, and you're like, well, should I be like that or should I be like this? And I explained why you first have to start off selling free music, and then as you get a fan base, you can move to making that a paid option as well as having free options. With the group Man Overboard I used to manage, one of the best examples is we bundled a sampler with any time you bought merch, you still got tons of free music from each of their releases, and they still do that to this day. And it really helps spread the music, and then when people get addicted to it, they want more, just, like what New Jack City with the crack dealers do. You're giving a free sample to make an addict. You want addicts for your music. The way you do that is by giving them something free. Just thankfully, instead of crack, music's a really powerful and healing, nice thing instead of a horrible thing that destroys your life.
Very good. I love the analogy, too. So you did something that I thought was really cool, a great little marketing technique, that you allowed people to, quote-unquote, buy a section of the book with a tweet or a Facebook like. What made you come up with this idea?
So that's actually something that I see a lot of the smart music people do. We also offer it for an email address as well. There's a company called Topspin Media that makes really great tools for bands that allow you to use all those things. We use a wide variety of tools to allow people to get the extra. But basically, the idea is, I think one of the things we express in the book is that every band should have what I call a free music page, where You want to have something for people who've never heard of you and your fans who really like you, so they keep coming back to get a dose from you. And, each of those three things does a different thing. Emails are the most powerful way to get fans to do something. Like Twitter and Facebook don't even get a quarter of the reaction that an email does, which I never realized until I did research and saw the numbers on this from my own experience. A tweet will help spread it, keep getting people to come back, and Facebook keeps people in touch with you. And it also keeps the word being spread as your friends see that they liked your page. So having all three of those on a page is a really powerful way to diversify the way you're spreading your message.
So who should read this book? Is it just for young bands, or is there anyone else who can benefit from your tips?
I would say this. I fully tell all my friends who try to support me with this book that if you're not interested in being a huge band and bettering yourself as a musician or a manager or a publicist or a record label, the first two chapters I think could be interesting to just about anybody who loves music. And I'll be honest, you can get those for free by downloading the excerpt. And I don't mind if you do. I just hope you help me spread the word about this to your musician friends. I think anybody who's a musician should read this book, which is why I wrote it. It really, we all have gaps in our education. And one of the things I really tried to do is leave it so that there's absolutely no gap in your education when you get done with this. That's why it's a 700-page book, is that I really wanted it so that anything you'd want to know, like there's always going to be little small gaps, but I wanted to cover every single way you could do to build a fan base and what goes into that and why these things are important. So I think if you're not reading this, you're going to soon be at the disadvantage of every other band who is reading it.
So let's say that I'm in a band and we're just starting out. We've got some songs put together and we've played some shows around the town and the neighboring towns. But unfortunately, we only have the time to read 3 chapters from your book. What are the 3 chapters that you think that we should really read to get the best tips?
Wow, just 3 out of 42. The chapter on managing, I think, is one of the most important ones because that gives you the beliefs. There's a chapter on free music, and there's a chapter on how you stay in the news cycle. I think one of the biggest mistakes that smaller bands make is there's so many lulls of their momentum, and they stop, they don't do anything for a while. And, to be honest with you, it's hard to get motivated to do all this work every day, but really once you get going, you see the rewards from it. It's so fun. I've watched so many times bands who are slightly motivated once they start doing this work. It really gears them up to doing the work each day once they know what they could be doing to build a fan base.
With websites like Twitter, Kickstarter, and Bandcamp, do you personally think that record labels still have an important role in the industry, or are independent bands and independent labels more the way to go?
I think that record labels do have a role. So, a label like Run for Cover Records, which is one of my favorite labels that I've worked with, people trust Jeff's taste and see that he's curating a certain type of music, even though it's very widespread. He'll put out a hip-hop act like GDP, some more indie stuff, some really punk stuff. But people trust some of these labels to bring you great music. Like when I was growing up, there was a label called Gerd Blanston that put out everything from Ted Leo to Radio 4, onto Dialect, who was an ambient hip-hop group. You learn to go to these labels for that. That helps bands get somewhere. At the same time, years ago, you needed to go to a label. Now you can do just as much yourself. You look at Macklemore, who has the 3rd longest running #1 song of all time. He's on his own label. All he has is a distribution and a publicist, a manager, and a booking agent, which may seem like, oh, wow, he has this huge infrastructure, but there's a big thing missing from that. There's no major label money. There's no major label advertising budget. It's just him being in control of himself and his career and the decisions that go into his creativity.
So now you've obviously, and you mentioned it before, you've done so much in the music industry. 2 quick questions on that. Which role do you think was your hardest, and which was the most enjoyable?
The hardest was managing groups. At the end of when I was managing Man Overboard in Transit, my girlfriend hated me since I would wake up at 2 a.m. and start answering emails. I could never sleep. There was never enough time in the day. The to-do list only got longer instead of shorter. managing a group when you're doing well is just, it's intense how much work it is. The most rewarding would be the one I've done the most of, which is being a record producer for 14 years. So obviously I love that one a lot because it's what I've been doing the most, and it's just so fun to get in the studio with great bands and create something you really, really, really love at the end of the day.
So with all this knowledge that you have about the music industry and everything, are you excited for the direction that it's going, or do you kind of wish that we could go back to some of the earlier days?
I absolutely think the earlier days are the worst thing ever. And I think a lot of people who are younger than me, like, I deal with a lot of punk bands and dance bands who are obviously in their early 20s, and I'm 35 years old, and I will tell you this is the best time ever to be making music that I've ever seen. The world gets flatter and flatter. Even just today, the RIAA announced that they're going to start making gold and platinum records certified off of streams, which is going to bring so many of the bands in the underground up to a bigger level where they can get through gates, like getting on Jimmy Fallon and all this, because you're just going to see these sales so inflated, and people are going to start taking numbers seriously. Because I think of a band like the Wonder Years, who have this massive dedicated fan base. They just made this amazing, amazing record that's going to do so well. But the fact is like their sales numbers aren't going to be in the 20,000s even, but their streams, their Spotify streams, because they're going to make a record that people just listen to over and over and over again. They're going to get so high up those charts from the consumption, and it's showing really how much people listen to these bands. Because 10 years ago, there was no way to see how often somebody listened to a CD just that they bought it. So there's all these one-hit wonders where they just listen to that single, and then once they were bored with that single, no one listened to it, even though everybody bought that record because they liked that one song. But records that people truly love are now going to be so rewarded in this new system.
So here at WXAV, we are a college radio station, and I'm curious to know, what role does college radio play in the music industry?
So what I think is always the interesting thing is I think a lot of people really underestimate college radio. From the time I was 17, I worked at WFMU, which was formerly a college radio station from a university called Uppsala. Then they became the largest freeform radio station in America. Radio is where tastemaking's made. DJs like yourself and all the college radio are where passionate people go to share the music they love. And that trickles down to other people who are passionate enough about music to turn into shows like yours and then spread the word about it. It's you guys who are filtering through and listening to all the music and hearing what's good so other people don't have to waste their time. And that's a huge thing because people trust you guys. And it's so important to have these institutions that do that. And while I love the idea that everybody can make up their minds about what's good, it's also nice that some people take the time to sort through it all and show us what's good when we're a little more lazy.
So what is one of your earliest musical memories?
So I wanted to be a police officer until I was about 11 years old. And then I saw Guns N' Roses' Sweet Child of Mine's video on MTV, and I instantly went, I'm going to be a rock star. Look at all those hot girls, hang out with those guys. They're smoking cigarettes, they're drinking. They're awesome. And since then, my life took a little bit of a different turn.
And do you have any plans to write any more books, or is this one big 700-page monster enough for you?
We actually chopped 1/3 of the book out of this book. We have a whole other book that's mostly written about how you find your voice as a musician. We don't tell you this is the right chords, this is the right thing. It's all just what you do in a creative process to become a better band. Obviously, as my background as a record producer and Todd, my co-author's background as a songwriter, we both watched how you create something and some of the ways that you could go about creating better music that just work as far as creative process and finding your voice. Like, obviously every genre we complain about how many bands sound alike. This kind of teaches you how to not do that. So we're hoping to put that out sometime the next year, and then this book is going to actually get updated every 6 months. We're going to make a new edition of it that adds to the, this information all changes so often, so we're going to try to keep it up to date. We keep it up to date every day on our blog, Musicformation, as well.
So do you think that there's going to be, are like those updates to your book, are those going to be straight from the blog, or does the blog have more or less information than the book will?
There's some things that I think that this book has a lot of stuff the blog doesn't have. The blog will mostly keep you up to date. There's a few little surprises we're going to have in the next book with some exclusive interviews. We've been collecting a few cool interviews with some of the people who are more formative in the new movement of doing it or deciding it yourself, not really doing it yourself, but, making their own moves in this world. So the book will have some exclusive content. The blog keeps everybody up to date with the changes that happen.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I definitely recommend people go out and check out the book, even if you just go for those first free chapters, because even when you get down and you're looking at all the different chapters and what's in store for you, it's amazing all the wealth of information that you're going to learn. So definitely check that out. But where can we get more info about you and your book and everything like that?
GetMoreFansBook.com is the site. And thank you so much. These were great questions. I really enjoyed this.
All right. Well, have a great time. And definitely, everybody, go check out that book.